Well, welcome to the new show. So it's a whole new series, but it's grown out of an old series, Dale.
It sure has.
So we ended up doing 12
Yes.
of my biography, and what started out as an idea to do the biography sort of evolved and grew, and because there was so much to tell about the cars, we really had to limit how much we could bring to you on the cars because it was running an hour anyhow, and because I was doing so much other things, we've decided, with the support of Lovells, have come on board to enable us to actually do that, an extension of that now.
Yeah.
And I've obviously had a lot of other cars besides the ones you can see behind me here, but these cars are all the full builds, and they have all been numbered, where when I was doing the customer builds, I actually had an aluminium plate that went on each car, and we're up to 15, I think, now. So what we're going to do is knuckle down and get in. But what I'd like to say from the start is these early cars, we didn't have anywhere near the same amount of photographs as we do nowadays. And because the customer cars, I do a lot of photos for the customer, justify what we're doing. So as we get into the series, we'll have a lot more in-depth photos. So these early ones really has been a bit of a chore to pull them together, and for that reason I've put the panel van and the Burgundy XA in the one, because I think we've got just over 200 photos. So without saying too much more, if you enjoy the show, tell your friends, subscribe if you haven't already, and if you put your notifications on when something new comes out. We're out doing events and stuff as well now, so if you've got that notification on, you'll know when we're up to something. And make a comment if you want to know something that I haven't been able to tell you on the show. I'll get back to you and let you know what I think, or what I used, or why I did, or why I haven't. Or
we've just got to remember back about 40 plus years ago, Howard, that's all.
Exactly right.
It seems easy.
It's longer than that. It's 45, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, crazy. Righto, so we're going to jump straight in and we'll get on to the photos. So we're going to do the panel van first. And I was fortunate enough that when I grew up, my dad was involved in a Ford dealership, and I worked at that dealership initially. So I ended up with a brand new XC panel van back at the time, and that was 1977. And I think, if my memory is correct, it was like November 77 that we took delivery of that. And the first photo there, I'm pretty sure, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure is at Mildura at the Van Nationals, and still very early days. So Sherwood green, chrome bumpers. It's got the GS grille because it was a GS obviously, or a rally pack, and I'd already put a set of wheels on it and some curtains and things happening. So that was that very early stage. Got the car, starting to make it look a bit cooler, and it didn't take long before we needed to do some mods, because if anyone's owned one of these standard, they drank fuel like no tomorrow. And the standard fix back then was to put a nice light cam in them, put an aluminium manifold and a 650 or a 600 Holly. I think we ended up going to a 750, was a bit much for it. Set of extractors, and you went from sort of 9 mile a gallon to probably 15, depending on how heavy your foot was.
Big change.
So you can see there, this is, my dad had a workshop down the north in Broken Hill, and that was a hoist that was outside. And that was the old oil ram. So you turn the compressor on, and that pumped the oil, and the ram pushed it up, and it had a couple of big lumps of bloody H-iron with some slide-on brackets and stuff. So out in the sun, working on it there. I got a circled edges for you, Dale. You see the 750 Coke there, mate, in the glass bottle? You
like your Coke.
So clearly, I didn't have any way of regassing the aircon.
No.
So it wasn't an aircon car, and the reason for that was the fact that if you ordered aircon, you got power steering. And for some reason back then, we didn't believe that was a good idea. It wasn't going to drive very good because it had power steer, all that sort of stuff. Big mistake, because you needed big arms to drive.
That's right.
Them.
It's so working on the guns to steer the car around the corner.
Right. Big front wheels and little steering wheel, and didn't go so well. You had to be moving to turn the thing. But anyhow, so it was an aftermarket aircon that I'd fitted myself, and was an integrated aftermarket, which meant you lost your glove box and stuff. But so I put that on that, and you'll see the rotary compressor. So that's why that's sort of happening. So this would have been, probably maybe 12 months in.
Yep.
And I laugh now when I look at some of these photos, the heater hose and all just hanging over the paint. You know, she'll be right.
Yeah, you get shot if you did that here now.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do that.
And all the front off it, because you've got to get the cam out.
Yes.
Yeah, so interesting times. And then the next photo here is a different time. So obviously it's got the manifold and the Holly on it there. And you can see the compressor I was talking about, the non-factory aircon. And clearly cleaning up the engine bay. And I relocated the battery in behind the driver's seat. So with a Falcon ute and panel van, the panel behind the seats, you can cut out the driver's side and it gives you a box in behind there. Yes. And I know when Fuzzy cut his out, it was big enough for a couple of yabby nets. So it's about this big. About this big.
Yeah.
So I had my battery in there.
Yep.
Once again, you know, you look back now and go, well, that's not going to pass the test. But anyhow, that's where the battery was. And the fuel tank's on the other side. So the battery went into there and I cleaned up both sides, and this would have been down at Dad's workshop. And as you would have heard in all the other programs, all of the covers and things are all old bedspreads and curtains from the motel, because we were in the motel business.
You used what was to hand.
So they were always laying around, so you're wondering about the pretty colours. So obviously I've done as much as I can do, and part of the issue with this was my daily.
Yeah.
So it was always straight after work Friday, get into it, and I had to be running
Monday
to go
morning.
to work Monday.
Yep.
So this would have been a weekend job.
I think we can all relate to that, Howard. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was all done, and I mean, I love this car. Something unbelievable. Unfortunately, someone in a little Volksy decided to get in our way, didn't give way to us, and took out the side. And sometimes when things go wrong in life, there's always an upside. And the upside with this one was that we got the insurance, and then we put it in and got that done. And I did one of those deals. Bill Coffey was the guy at the panel shop.
Yep.
And him and Gary Dart, that you'll see later in the program, were the guys that were involved in that. So we straightened it up, and I stripped it all out, and we give the whole thing a respray as part of the, you know, I'll help out and we'll do this. And so we did that. And that's Bill hanging through the side window there. And this is part of my learning curve.
Yeah, because this is a
so
relatively
at this
new
point,
car.
I know nothing. Yeah, so this, it's only 18 months old or something.
Yep.
But unfortunately, the photos weren't real good, and I've tried to clean them up as much as I can to give you a bit of an idea. No major damage and no structural damage. It was all just bits and pieces. But you can see that one outside now there where he's patched up all the bits and pieces to make it nice and straight. And that's Bill there and Gary.
Yep.
You can see it's panel van here, mate. There's a hole
few
in there.
around.
Yeah, the Sandman, got the stripes on it. And I'm looking at the back doors there. I vaguely recall that I backed into something and I'd repaired the back doors, because there's a fair bit of something going on in those as well.
Bit of patchwork.
A bit of patchwork happening, and it's really interesting. It's virtually a brand new car, but it's still already cracked along that body line where they all go. And there it is, looking pretty good. So that would have been acrylic, back in the acrylic days. So as Gary Dart used to say, I'll just get the wand out, give her a bit of a lick with the wand.
Bit of a touch up.
And while they were doing that, I've wanted some sort of rear wing on it. And, you know, most of the vans had that kick-up tail a bit like a Cobra has. And I've never been a massive fan. I mean, you know, they suit different cars, but it wasn't what I really wanted. And what you see here, the white part was a dust deflector off a Valiant, and pretty much current era, so late 70s. And then this is down Dad's workshop. I'm raided the boat department down there and got a bit of fiberglass out and extended the sides down so that it would sit in the drip gutter on the back. So just a few holes in the roof, and it sat in the drip gutter. And I really like that look, and you'll see further on. So there's a little skinny one of me there, mate. So 25 I would have been there, 26
hair's a bit longer
maybe.
Hair's a bit longer, Howard. No greys?
Plenty of hair, mate. Yeah, plenty of hair. Actually, I probably wouldn't have. That would have been 78, so you can probably work that out now, but yeah.
It's a while ago.
20-ish. 20-ish. So this is moving on a bit now, and like I said, I don't have a lot of build photos. It was mainly, you know, when we're off somewhere at a show. So this was Hall's Gap, so we're probably 78. maybe 79. So the Halls Gap was a big Easter show, big van show.
Yep.
And anything up to 400 panel vans would turn up for that event. And this is getting well into it. So you can see we've gone bubble windows now, changed the grille to Fairmont, painted the bumpers, got the Cobra front spoiler. Now over the years, you know, people that watch what I do, you know, I'm not frightened to have a play with a bit of fiberglass or a bit of that. My dad used to build fiberglass boats.
Yep.
So when I'm growing up down the workshop, you've got the plumbers, tank makers, and back when I was a kid, the plumbers made the downpipes. You know, they rolled them and hammered them and soldered them and all that sort of stuff. So I grew up watching all of this, not necessarily doing, but watching. And I'd seen what was happening with the boats where they make moulds and all, and I actually made a front spoiler. I spent weekend after weekend making a buck, basically, what I wanted it to look like, and then took it off and made a mould, and then made the fiberglass one out of that, put it on, thought it was as ugly as sin, and took it back off again. But it's all that learning process.
Absolutely,
again,
you start somewhere.
to actually get a feel for how things work, you know, what goes on. So we used to spend, when I say we, Heather and I, you know, Fridays was always has and it still is shed night.
Yep.
So it was like down the workshop Friday night, work on the van, maybe get into, if we weren't doing too much, get into town, chuck a few laps at midnight or whatever. But more often than not, something was going on for the whole weekend. And that may have been just painting the bumpers, and a lot of that I learnt with the pressure pack.
Yes.
So the old Dupla colour, the little tiny tins.
Yep.
You know, bumper bar, I need about 6 tins. Back when they were only a couple of bucks probably.
Yep.
So a lot of that was, you know, all done and learnt through watching, you know, my brother, my cousin, they could all paint, but it was all almost self-taught. In the sense that, I'll have a go, and if it runs, you're too close, and you slowly learn. And it's interesting that I can get a really good finish out of a pressure pack because the concept's no different. It's just a little bit harder on your finger.
Yeah, a little bit different applicator, but it's the same theory, isn't it?
So if you've got the feel and you know where you're going, so a lot of that early work was done that way, and I tended to have liked the look of the Fairmont style of things, so I'd added the wheel trims on the wheel arches off the XB and gone to the Fairmont grille, and then I changed the badges out. They were all black and I changed them to chrome. The side indicators, I'd gone to the I think they were Fairlane or LTD with the chrome outers. So just all those little things that have been added on. And now the next photo here, suspension wise, under the rear there you can see I've got like a K-Max sway bar, but we give it the chrome treatment, so it probably didn't work that well. Bit of metal embrittlement.
Yep.
Bit of that. We've all heard about that chrome process that you shouldn't do unless you do the heat treatment, and I don't know there's too many places that do that correctly, but there's probably someone, because you see a lot of chrome springs and stuff, you know, suspension springs.
Certainly in this show scene.
So we used to run like a short and front shock. You know, back then I'm trying to think exactly what brand we used to run. I ran gas for a while, and at very early days we used to just cut either 1 or 1.5 coils off and throw them back in again. But later on, you know, got a bit high tech and bought the real ones. But more often than not, we'd lowered a lot of cars in Broken Hill with Oxy, I can tell you. And decent front bar. I always found around 25, 27 mil was good on the front of these. And then you can see the ladder bars, the tramp rods, they were really more about look than anything else. I don't know whether they actually did too much.
Well, they would have had some effect, but
yeah. So those, and then the red shock there, we actually had the pump ups on it.
Yep.
Which were like a ride carrying thing, because you imagine all the trim we stuck in it. They were pretty heavy, but the trick with those, we used to buy an extra kit and run a separate valve in each shock.
So you could do them independent.
So you have them independent, because if you put them through a T-piece, when you go in the corner, as you go around the air in this one,
would push it further over.
So it'd double up.
Yeah.
So they actually work really well. And I mean, that car, back in the 70s when there were speed limits, but no one really cared, you know, we used to sit on ridiculous speeds in that, and it felt very safe. You know, the old TAs, mate. TAs all round. So the rears, the rear leaf springs, I think, were pretty much stock. and so front and back sway bars, good shocks, and yeah, went pretty well. So the next process, I guess, with it was to get a bit more power. You know, the old story, and you never got enough.
Satisfied.
Never got enough. And this is getting pretty well into it. So this is in our new home. So in the process of, you know, getting the van, we got married, built a house, all those sorts of things. And I was interesting looking at this on the wall.
I'm just looking at those names up and photos on the wall there.
And remembering this is current.
Yes.
Yeah, not... He used to be cool. This is current. So yeah, so you've got Dick Johnson and Alan Moffat hanging on the wall there.
Yep.
And there was plenty of Ford stuff stuck around on the walls. So what's happening is I ended up getting the heads done, you know, the old port job, 4V valves, and it used to be like, you know, you'd read it in the magazine. So it's like stainless steel, single groove, dual spring, blah blah blah, all the bits and pieces. So that's pretty much where we're at.
Yeah, well, there was no internet. We were just going off car magazines and catalogs.
And the guy in the shop, you know.
And the guy in the shop,
when
exactly.
you see old Tuvi at Formula Motors and go, you know, I'm thinking about doing this. Oh yeah, you could go this way, that way. Get out the Sig Erskine book or the Crow Cams and work out what you're going to do.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a step up, and we're probably getting close to 400 maybe with that particular setup. And at that point, we still hadn't got to the roller rocker stage.
No.
So, you know, my brother was racing Fords at that point, so I had access to know what was going on.
Yes.
But I mean, I got no idea, really. I'm just playing the game.
You're being honest now, yeah.
And I can't work out why I would have a red engine, except I don't like blue engines in green cars, so I'm guessing that's how I ended up with Chev red on my Cleveland.
Red goes faster, is it?
Red goes faster, maybe.
That's probably what it is.
And I always liked the look of the air cleaner. My dad had one of those on his boat, but it wasn't very effective on... Every time you got a backfire, it burnt the element out of it. It's a bit frustrating. But it was a pretty cool looking thing.
It looks stylish.
Bit of chrome. And of course a Mallory twin point.
Yep.
Which now you throw over your shoulder and put something else in it.
Yeah, all electronics now.
So that's it back in the bay, and we've obviously a bit more bling, the king of bling. So we've polished up the factory coil and chromed the bloody bracket, the badge out of the grille.
Yep. Strut
towers on there.
And,
all the bits and pieces. But still functional. So it's still my driver, you know. So the heater works, the aircon works, all that sort of stuff. And inside's been slowly progressing along, and I'm trying to work out when and how things happened here, because I put the Cortina Console in it, and the main reason for that is the XC console, it didn't enable you to have the third person, or more importantly, Heather had a little poodle, so the dog used to sit in the middle. But if you're away, you want to climb through to get in the back through the archway, it's a bit hard over the plastic console.
Yep.
So you can see the padded bit in the middle I made up there to be able to seat someone in there or get in the back or whatever. And the console there's out of a Cortina. But at some point, I think when I got involved with the van club, we all had, you know, breaker.
The CB,
Yeah, the C4.
Yep.
So you can see that there in the middle there now, but I noticed in some of the earlier photos it's not there, and we'll see those in a minute. But so the Cortina Console, that was out of the current model, so whatever late 70s Cortina was, and because I'm working in spare parts, it's just like, oh yeah, I'll look that up. Oh yeah, it's not too bad, I'll just buy a new one. So that's what that was. So where the flower is there on Heather's side, the 351 badge come off of that burnt out GT that got turned into a stock car when you got to go and look at my biography for that. So I had the XW, I think it was, badge, and then the console, and then I'd say the original radios in the middle, and then the clock down the bottom. And it all looked, I thought, pretty cool back in the day. And then you can see on the right hand side where the stereo would normally be is the air conditioning knobs. And back looking through the steering wheel, you can see now the cassette player. And the CV's not there. So I'm just not sure when things happen. But that was the layout, and obviously different seat covers.
But you were never satisfied with standard, were you? You had to change it.
Well, obviously I wasn't satisfied with what I did either, because I kept changing it. And then You see, it must have the camera going. See what's on the centre console?
Yes.
This is the flash bulbs out of the camera. So it was probably the little bloody Kodak, you used to plug that.
Yeah.
You that old?
I am that old.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was the progression there. So the rest of the dash looked pretty standard, and obviously the little steering wheel.
Yep. The muscle
the
building.
Muscle builder.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it had been a gradual change, and I had
See, this is what you did with your own car, and you know.
That's it.
It wasn't a project car. It was your daily driver, and you're just customising it as you go.
So we ran a set of harnesses in it.
Yep.
But they were just the standard buckle clip-on ones. I can't think of the brand back then, but so we had the harness in it, and then as the trim's starting to grow, and obviously the archway's there, and we'll see that in a minute, we put the overhead console in.
Mm-hmm.
And all those switches there all had a use, because the thing had about 6 speakers in it and 2 sets of headphones.
Yep.
So when we travel, we used to actually put headphones on with the music cranking, and that way all those switches I could turn on and off the headphones, or if we're at a party I could open the back doors up, turn all the other speakers off, and just have the back doors being Mr. Music.
There you go.
So had all of the ability to do that, and it looked pretty cool. It looks like the flight centre.
Exactly.
So with the trim side of it, it was one of those processes where, we've all got a mate.
Yep.
And Neville Taylor was a local trimmer. Mm-hmm. And, he was in that sort of same age. And I used to go around and see Nev, and I'd make the timber panels up, and then I'd go around to his work after hours, and he'd go, right, I stick this on there, do that, and we'd work out the fabrics, and he'd get the fabrics in. So this photo here with the beer cans now, this is that first stage. So it's still got the original hood lining in it. Mm-hmm. Obviously made the archway, and we've trimmed that up, and then put the curtains in, and then the trim panel over that. And as you'll see, we've sort of progressed in there, but I like the matching velvet cushions, mate.
Yes.
And the blankie.
Very, very stylish. So you didn't realise how much you were getting training doing this,
domesticated.
Did you? Yeah.
That's it. So there's no console there, so I'm out of order, Dale.
That's all right.
So the overhead's not in it. So that's that first stage, and we're starting to get a little bit of direction. So I've now got the roof panel in. So that's now a bit of plywood.
With a mirror?
With a mirror.
Yeah.
Perspex mirror in the roof. And that sat down and sat on the archway at the front and the sides, and then a panel at the back. And that stayed in there, so that was handy. Didn't fall down. And then the next phase so this was just after my 21st birthday, because my birthday list, what do you want for your birthday?
The wish list.
Included all the things I needed to fit the back of the van out. So I needed a pair of chandeliers.
Yep. I
need a night to go in the corner. And the thing about panel van is they're all themed.
Yes.
It was all about a theme.
Yep.
So,
and they were massive back in that.
Oh.
Like you said, that go into that show when there'd be 400 panel vans. I mean, here on the south coast, I mean, it was huge, and you could remember all the names of them.
Trying to stand out a bit.
Exactly.
So talking about names, so Magnum Force.
Yeah, of course.
The Clint Eastwood fan.
Yeah.
So it had the mirror line bar, and the bottles had the little clamps on them and everything. So they were real and effective. The champagne glasses were urethane down.
Well, you didn't want that falling around.
The champagne, that was for looks, but it did work. And the little cupboards, they all opened up so you could stack all your gear in it. And there was still enough room to sleep in it.
West End sponsored product at the end there, I noticed.
Used to be a big West End drinker. And then, we go on to the curtains now, and it's just growing, evolving. Yep. And then there's pretty much the end result. And I threw that one in because it's got the one-piece back bumper.
Yep.
So that's pretty much where the van finished. And by this stage, we're married, had our first child, and not enough room. So it needed to move on. So a couple of shots here of some of the shows. So that was a Broken Hill show. That one's in Adelaide, me and Fuzz. It's Fuzz's red van next to me there. And these are pretty much how they looked. And that photo was taken by the local paper. I did a little ad in the paper when I was trying to sell it. And that one was down at Adelaide as well. We went down there for a show. So, headlight covers in the black, sitting pretty good. Bubble windows, name across the windscreen, all that sort of stuff. And that was really where we finished, and then went from there and headed off into the street machining world.
Yes.
So we're 1982 now, and the start of the new car. So I'm sort of reading, Street Machine magazine has now evolved from Van Wheels, and a few of the guys that I was involved with, Steve Dobson that had Midnight Express, met him at a few Adelaide shows, and he was telling me all about street machining, and this is going to be the new thing, and I'm going, oh yeah, it sounds pretty good. So that's once we got married and we needed a family car, the van went, and I struggled to get rid of the van for what I wanted, so I ended up taking all the good bits out of the motor and pinched the diff out of it and put a Borg Warner in it, and tried to get the price down enough to move it on. And I did a deal and traded a GXL on that for Heather to drive, and then had enough bits to think about building this sedan. So I'm 25 years old, got a new young family, and we used to go to the club on a Friday night. And with Heather's mum and dad, and drop a few bucks there. And I said to Heather, if we don't go there, I'll take $50 out of the kitty each week to go towards building this car over 4 years. So that's how it started. So 40 years on, I don't know what 500 I don't know what $50 a week would be in today's money.
It's a bit.
It might be 500, I don't know. But that was how we did it.
Yeah.
So it was.
You had to plan, didn't
it? Was skimp and scrape, but it was a 4-year plan and $50 a week. So I started looking, and this is what I turned up initially. So I needed to have obviously a car, but I needed parts, and I started chasing everything I needed to put together what was going to be this car with no money. So it was the culmination of a whole lot of different.
That was the sticking point, wasn't
wrecks
it?
And things, and I had no money. So I think this one was $100. And remember, it's 10 years old. Back then, not very old at all.
At least it wasn't really rusty coming from the hill.
And I really wish I was better at photography back then than I am now, because these are all a bit blurry. So this car was built in the house shed, and it was, in feet terms, was 22 by 15 feet. So you can relate that to metric if you want that.
Tiny.
So that's it there, and more often than not you're working out the front under the veranda, and obviously you can see there at the back was the lawn. So I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm reading Street Machine.
You heard that here first, people.
Hot Rodding magazine. My brother's a plumber, my dad's a plumber, and I've got a mate that's a mechanic, I've got a mate that's a painter and a boiler maker. So we're all just helping each other and all learning. And you can see there that I've rolled this thing up on a couple of blocks of timber. Put some pretty good dents in the sills, but at least I've got access to underneath. So I'd seen different things over the years on, how to do it, roll it up on tyres and all that sort of thing. This was before rotisseries were even a thing.
Yes.
Like what we do nowadays, and you look at what we used to do back then, is crazy. So that was all hand stripped, the old wire wheel and the heat gun, and get all the rubbish off it.
In a 7x5 shed.
Yeah.
A very small one.
In Broken Hill, which means very cold in the winter and very hot in the summer.
Yes.
And you can see the at the top of the photo there, the green felt. That's my ideas board. So nowadays it's on the computer. But if I seen something in a magazine I liked, I used to cut it out and get the staple gun out and staple it up there, and that was, this is what I'm going to do.
Working towards that.
Yeah, and I was buying, American hot rod, American hot rodding, and Carcraft were the three main mags I bought out of the US. Like, the local shop had them, but I mean they were grossly expensive back in the time. So Street Machine, I think, was quarterly. Or maybe bi-monthly.
It wasn't every month, that's for sure.
Street rodding was, So there wasn't a lot of information, so I grabbed the American stuff, and I'm trying to sort of follow the American trends a bit. But obviously I had a feel for what I liked. That's always been my way. And the process now is to work down and turn this thing into something nice based on what I'd seen in 4 years of panel vanning. And at this point in time, I'd been to the Hot Rod Nationals in Mildura, I think late 70s, early 80s, and I'd been to a couple of Van Nationals.
Yep.
And I've been down to, I think, the Adelaide Hot Rod Show.
Okay.
So I've got an idea, and I'm reading books and I'm
Yep.
learning. So that was sort of part of the process. So for those that have watched my biography know that my dad raced boats and my brother raced boats. So I was pretty much accustomed to tunnel rams and having stuff and all that sort of thing.
That was the go, wasn't it?
So I wanted to go down that track. And the photo there is of my actual motor. And the tunnel ram there, I went on the net and found a decent photo because it was pretty hard to see in these old photos. So these are a couple of current ones. So that's the actual manifold we used, and I'm pretty sure by memory it was the only one available. And I just thought it was very bulky, and the way it bolted together was very cumbersome. So what I did was looking down from the top of the manifold there, where that flat plate is on the inside of the plenum there, I actually drilled a hole down through there and put the drill bit in the hole to hold it in position so that I could...
Like a dowel. Yeah.
Like a dowel, yeah. So I could, when I pulled it apart and put it back together, it was always the same. And then went about cutting all the bits off I didn't like. So I just needed to make sure it wasn't going to move around so I wasn't sort of wasting my time. So I cut the brand off the side, all those lips off, and right across the front. And they'd actually machined a piece out of the front of it for the distributor, so I rounded all that off and made it look what I thought looked pretty cool. And when the car was finished, there was quite a lot of comment about, who polished the manifold, what brand is it, all that, because it was something different. And this game's about being different.
Yeah, it was one of a kind.
And still is.
Yeah.
I mean, nowadays, with CNCs and you watch the sort of stuff being produced today, absolutely blows my mind, where this would have been 40, 50, 60 hours on the grinder and the die grinder and all that sort of stuff to get it to the point that it is there. So with that photo there, you can see the bonnet opening. I've cut the hole for the bonnet, and you can see the opening there, and I notice in the next one you can see I've actually welded a bit in it. So I'm starting to dabble a bit in the bodywork as well, and I've got the bay looking reasonably tidy and setting up radiators and things, and there was nothing in your face about any of that. And obviously I'd bought a Gilmore drive for it, and anyone that's run a Gilmore drive on a Cleveland know that they sound cool but not for long. They tend the belts don't stay on them for long.
Tend to last.
I think they're a good drag race thing, but they're not designed for the street that well. So that's that manifold now, as it sat, and you can tell it just looks taller, nicer, leaner, better looking manifold, and obviously a whole lot of other bits and pieces being added on there. Now the next one,
I like this one.
So it was going to be auto.
Yep.
And I thought, wonder what's in one of them. So I decided on one day that I might have a look. So I pulled an auto. You ever pulled an auto apart, Dale?
No, I haven't been game to pull an auto apart.
I've only ever pulled one apart, and I put it all in a box and took it to the auto guy and said,
"Can you put that back together?
Can you see if that's any good?"
Yeah,
that's what we're going to run.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd throw that in.
That's why I haven't pulled one apart.
Yeah, no, it's a bit of a science that I don't know too much about.
Yeah.
I just looking, besides Leon, his little bike there, see in the background is my air cooler, mate. Got the little evap sitting there. It must have been a bit warm.
Very popular.
So there I am. So we've probably moved up to about 84. So I'm 27 now. And got the steering wheel.
Is it attached?
No.
Okay.
Just looking good. So there's a little progression of photos here. So I said earlier I'd cut the hole, and you can see there I've used a bit of the steel I cut out of the bonnet to fill the back in by the look of it. And then I wanted a little radius lip on the bonnet.
Little rise.
Something that's going to look nice. So I'm reading up in the magazines, and I'd read somewhere that if you get a towel and soak it in water and then lay it along where you're going to weld, when you're welding it, that'll stop the heat going out and stopping it buckling.
Was that good theory, Howard?
Didn't work so well for me. So, I mean, I got it in. So I got a bit of probably 5mm round, might have been 6, and made the shape. Bent it around the oxy bottle and got it all the right shape. Sat it on there and started tacking and welding, and then just destroyed the bonnet pretty much. But it's the only one I had. So we
made it work.
Belted it around a bit, and it was a very heavy bonnet in the end.
Very secure.
But it's still on it.
Yeah.
It's still on the car today. And you can see there, that was the effect I was after. So what I didn't want is I was looking at all of the cars with blowers and rams, and most of them had a hole cut with either a bit of something stuck over it, you know, the chrome stuff to go down the end of the door, you know, one of them around it or something. But I wanted something like that that looked nice with the little raised edge. So that's how we created that, and was nicely shaped out of filler. So
you can do most things with filler.
That did the job. And the same sort of process was happening, you know, in the bay, you know, welding up holes, and that had been a process that we'd followed on from the panel van. And at this point in time, Dad had bought a MIG, and the one I've still got. That I never ever been paid for, I don't think. But I used to go and get it, bring it home on the weekend, take it back to the workshop, and in the end, they never used to use it much. So if they wanted it, they used to come and get it off me, because I always was using it. So I learnt to weld with that MIG. But
you go all right now.
Especially with that one, because I know what it does.
40 years in the making, yes.
So early on, either my brother would oxy weld the holes up for me, or Kim Hooper, Hooper's Trailers, he would come around, and then he progressively taught me to weld, and then I'd only get him in for the, you know, weld and die cast or whatever, and you know,
hard
it sort of progressed that way. So we're welding things up, we're making things neat, and this next run of photos you'll see now, I'm doing panel by panel, and I mean, I'm probably making it up as I'm going. I've got good hands, and I've got a good eye. I can sort of feel and
it's that artistic flair.
And I know where it should go and what it should look like. Back then, it was probably taking me a long time to achieve it. And it's funny now, I look at all of these people with their splines and blocks that you can buy and all of that. When I did this car, to do those quarters, I got a piece of Perspex that was the length of 2 sheets of wet and dry, and half the width. And you used to be able to, remember the company Bear that made glues and stuff? Well, they had an adhesive for sticking
paper on
dish cement, it was called. I'm trying to think of it, dish cement. So I got that Perspex, and I've got 2 blocks and Perspex, and made a block that was this long by this wide, so it was a spline. And I used that to do the quarters to get my shape. And I'd probably read it in a book, you know, because there was no bloody YouTube back then, but I'd seen it somewhere, so I'd made this thing up, and that's how I did the top of the quarters and shaped them. And I know you asked me when we were looking at the photos earlier, why black?
I just thought you liked black.
Yeah, and everyone thought I was going to paint it black, but I just always read and heard and been told, you know, don't paint your car black because you'll see all the faults. So I thought if I paint it black, I'll be able to find all the faults and fix them. So because it's acrylic, it was really like that last trace coat, but it was a full coat. And the really horrible blurry photo there's the only photo I have with all the front and all on it when it was in black. And I'm glad I painted it red. So that was obviously mock-up. And the really interesting part now is you look at that and say, look at the grille. You go, that's new old stock. Well, no, that was walk in the dealership and buy one.
They weren't that old.
The car was 10 years old, and the dealer, you know, back then, you know, you'd be jumping up and down if you had a 15-year-old car and you couldn't buy parts for it. Where nowadays, what is it, 6-7 years and bad luck.
A couple of years out of production and you're toast.
So at this point, you could still go and buy a new grille. And I'm pretty sure I bought a new guard or two and odds and ends.
Imagine what they're worth now, Howard.
Well, a Repo XA GT grill's about $12.50, so probably $4 or $5 grand, maybe more.
If you could get one.
Exactly. So the process was going forward, and we're doing panel by panel, and I looked at that one earlier and thought, well, that's looking pretty good in the front. And it made up my mind around the front of the guard and across the bonnet. The moulds never sort of sat right and looked right. Well, nowadays we reshape the moulds, where back then I just welded it all up and got rid of them. So that was my solution to that, was to weld up the nose of the guard and bog it up.
Well, there's a little bit of, I see that XC Boss out the back here that's got a little bit of that going on as well, isn't it?
It's got a fair bit of that going on. So it was, getting the shape right, getting it to happen, and then we always had a good frost that year because there's no green lawn, mate. I don't know what's going on with the height of the thing, but it's sitting up in the air, and I'd made up my mind, and there's a photo here somewhere with the diff in it, so I've still got the diff out of the van, and you can see it there. So I've obviously taken the diff and the sway bar.
Yep.
Now, I don't think the sway bar ended up getting the Guernsey because I don't think it ended up on it, but I ended up putting a set of ladder bars on it. So I'm probably watching a bit of drag racing and stuff and think that'd be cool.
I think that the neighbour across the road in that photo, lucky he hasn't had his diff stolen.
It's a nice looking XC,
it is
that one.
a nice looking one over there, yeah.
So it's sitting up in the air pretty well there, but you can see the ladder bar just sitting down. And unbeknownst to me, you don't have ladder bars on leaf springs because they then bind up.
Okay.
So effectively, your ladder bar restricts the movement this way because it can only go through the arc of the point, but the leaf spring has got the mount on the back, so the leaf spring actually grows.
It's fighting it, yes.
Yeah, so it's not the desired effect. Mark Sanders informed me of that.
Sometime after the fact, yeah.
Yeah, so that was when I met him, when we had that little discussion. So it's sitting way up in the air, I don't know what's going on there. So that's the photo I was thinking of.
Yep.
And it's set a really long rear shocks. But we're progressing along, and this photo now, you can see the diffs in the car, so obviously the car's painted, so this is well out of sequence for some reason. But it just shows, I'm in that cramped position.
Yep.
I've still got that same rack out the back. I don't know if it's the same bit of inch tube, but it looks just like what when Louise looked at the photos the other day, she said, Dad, do you still do it like that? I said,
yes.
Yeah, I know.
Still use it.
Painting everything, to work for us. And the car's now at a point where it's a roller so we can get some paint on it. So Gary Dart, that was painting the panel van where he worked, I've got the name Gaz pretty well, and he's ended up painting the car for me. I can't remember whether I did jams and stuff and he just did the outside. It's just too long ago. But this photo here is actually out at his home in his shed, and it wasn't a very old shed by memory, and we give the floor a bit of a birthday. So acrylic again, was painted out there. I'm pretty sure we give it a run over with the buff. Well, he ran the buff over it out at his place, and then we took it home. So that's how the front of Mum and Dad's drop into showing progress.
Yes.
This is probably 3 years into the build.
Into the 4-year build, yes. So how were we aware of what we were trying in terms of, the judging? I mean, we know we've spoken about all the trophies and stuff that you've earned over the years and that, but this was your first attempt. This was your first project build, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, I'd chased the panel van side of things, so I'd sort of built a nice local van, and I went away to a few shows, and I seen what I needed to do, and the final hurrah with that was we went to Melbourne for a trip, and we'd got to what was classed as like Category 2. So Category 1 was top van, Category 2 was interior, engine bay, undercarriage or whatever, and then you went to Best Ford and then Best XC or whatever down the line. So we got to a point where we picked up a trim trophy somewhere in an engine bay. So it got to sort of Category 2, and I'm seeing what everyone else was doing. And then when I went home, I've sort of got that in my head. And my plan was to build a street machine and go back with something really cool. The mistake I made was I didn't go and have a look on the way.
Yeah, at the shows of each year.
Yeah, so I mean, part of the problem was I lived in Broken Hill. So I'm like...
It's a little bit away from
5 to
most
6 hours from anywhere. So Adelaide's 5 hours. Melbourne's 8 or 9. Sydney's 12. So there's no sort of, I'll zip in and have a look at a show. And if you want to go to the Nationals or whatever, it was always a long way, and I'm busy at work and busy building the car. So when I've turned up at the 86 Nationals, things had moved. The goalpost had moved.
Because you were still back in the 82.
Pretty much.
Sort of Nationals.
So the car was well respected and was accepted well into what we were doing, but it wasn't at leading edge because we didn't know what we needed to do to be leading edge. So this process was And I was building the car so it could go through and at the RTA and be registered.
Yeah.
Yep. So it sat a bit high and it didn't have tubs and you could have had bigger wheels. So I wasn't the drag race guy that turns up to the Nationals. It was a fully registered car I could drive around. Not that I ever drove it much. So it was one of those things that I try and preach to people now is know what you want out of the car. Work out what it takes to achieve that, and whether it's time slits at the races, whether it's fully registered legally 100%, or whether it's to win trophies. You need to have that goal very firmly set before you start.
Yeah, and at the forefront of your mind.
Yeah. So that was pretty much where we're heading. And at that stage, I'd always had a good eye for detail, which everyone always tells me about, but more so from a presentation point of view. I used to wash my panel van every day. I always drove a clean car. It was polished every couple of months, and everything was Mickey Mouse. And that started to show him what I was doing here, is that Gary and I polished the car, but then I'd go home and spend another 100 hours tinkering away, making it better.
Doing
and
the bits that you don't see.
Yeah, and I mean, the shine, and someone made a comment the other day about Rock 4, 30 years on, how did I get the acrylic to look like that? Well, it's just time. That's really what it is. So there's a young fella there. So that's out the front now. It's got the glass in it, so it's starting to progress. And then I'm limited at my house to be able to put motors in and out. And my brother lived 2 doors up. So we used to push it over there to pull the motor out, or drive it in and pull it out, or whatever had to happen. So this is the first trip over there. So it's gone over to get the engine put in it for the first time. And then something's out of sequence because there's no motor in it yet. That was a little trip to Melbourne. So a few chrome goodies there. So the manifold obviously had already had that, and I've polished that, and then bought the rocker covers and the Gilmore drive and the hat. And I mean, back in the day, to own some of that red and blue stuff was pretty cool.
Absolutely, that was.
It was like, whoa, look at this.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of that around back
Earls
then.
and Russell.
Yep.
Yeah, fittings. And then what we're looking at there now is the fit up, and I'm thinking this is 1.5. It's not the first time because there's a bit too much chrome on there. But you can see that the tank's been deleted with a flat sheet. And you can see the next photo, the springs are black. So the first one is out of sequence. But so this photo now, the black springs, you can see what I'm talking about, the ladder bars. So the ladder bar ties everything in. It works, but it people tell me it's not what you should do. So that's the rear, the front end now. So this is me building my car to what I like and what I wanted to do. And I'd gone to a huge amount of trouble to actually die grind all of the stub axles and all the bits and pieces, paint it all body colour and hand polish it, and it was magnificent. In my eye, I really loved the way it looked, and I got a lot of good comments about it. And I'd done the steering arms in black and all the rest in body colour, and just that little bit of chrome on the sway bar and the bolts.
Just a few little highlights.
And I really liked the way that presented and the way it looked. Well, for those that have watched the biography, what happened is when I started going to the hot rod shows and all, and I'm struggling a bit, I'm going okay, but I'm not winning much. And you used to be able to go into the office and talk to the judges and say, well, okay, what have I done wrong? Why am I not competing against that? And they said, well, how do you need to look at your undercarriage and go and have a look at this particular car, and compare it to your car and make your own decision. So I went over and looked at the particular car and it's all chrome, went over to mine, it's all paint. So, well, that's easy. I'll just take it all of the chrome platers and get it all plated. So all those hours I'd spent painting and polishing and all really were falling on deaf ears.
But that was the way it was judged back then.
At that point.
At that time.
And of course what happened is when I redid it the next time, it went back to paint because they'd worked out that's harder and you probably should get more points. So there's that motor that I was looking for. So you can see there it's just got a single carby. So that would have been one of Reg's off one of his motors. So we've put a single carby on it just to get it running. So we've dropped it in with the single on it, and that's over at his shed. And that's his mate Barney Clifford. Used to help him, one of his crew off his boat crew. And my brother there, Brother Reg. So we've put that in over at his place. I've joined the crew, so I was doing a bit as
Bed
well.
sheets down, mutter in.
They're underlays.
Oh, the underlay off the
bit more
mattress.
padding,
Oh,
mattress
okay.
underlays, yeah. Got my Ford shirt on. So in she goes. And it's interesting there, and I think you've done that here, Dale, is that when the motor goes in, the extractor's got to go in with it because it won't fit afterwards around the steering box.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that went in, and then back over at home doing the wiring. So by memory, we pretty much used most of the original, but added, where I'd run it up under guards and stuff. And I'm pretty handy from an electrical point of view. I can actually always been able to read a diagram. Get yourself a decent workshop manual, like a genuine workshop manual for one of these era cars, and it's very basic. A's really basic, B's not so bad, C gets a bit more complicated. Go and do something like an FG. The wiring's about this thick. We've done that the other day as well. But I mean, I've always been able to do that and understand the process and the fact that Ford primarily used earth switching.
But it's not like you jumped in and learned an FG with no experience. You've gained all that experience. 40 years gets you to that point.
So this is fire up night. So Rowie in the background in the blue shirt, the engine builder. Guy I used to ride motorbikes with, worked at the Ford dealership, all that sort of stuff. My son, young Lee, there when he was a little tacker. That looks like Barney looking at us, my brother Reg, and the guy with his back to us would be Bob Sherry, I reckon. And Bob was up doing some work on one of Reg's engines that weekend, and he was hanging around giving us a bit of a hand. So, and I dare say that's Fuzzy behind him, or Louis, one of them. So that particular night, we got it running, and one of the needle and seats stuck open. Got a bit of shit, probably a bit of rubber. Things you learn when you're cutting those lines. You don't cut them with a friction cutter and then not clean them out. You get a little bit of rubber sticks in the seat. So we had a fuel going everywhere, so we fixed all that and got it running, and didn't seem to create any issues that we're aware of. But when I got the car going, got it registered. It had this little noise in it, and it was a new engine, and it was sort of frustrating the hell out of me. And I've got photos somewhere, and for the life of me I can't find them, and hopefully before this goes up at the end of the week I'll find them. But I've got this one photo there. That there is after the event. So the car's registered, running, but it's got this knock in it, and we're meant to be going to Summernats. So the Nationals, 86 Nationals before the Summernats. And we start looking for this noise, it's got to be up the top. Sounds like, the old screwdriver. Can't
is it a tappet?
So we tear the thing apart. We do an all-nighter. We end up putting bearings in it because that was the only thing that we thought could make the noise. Put it all back together, still make the noise.
Great.
Off to the event.
We're going anyway.
Did the event. No problems. Still got the noise. Come home. Still looking for it. Gone for a lap round the block, just like a normal city block. I'll give it a couple of splurts, a couple of 6 granders. Come round the corner around my brother's place, and just, feather and the throttle come round with the twin hollies and that on it. And it goes, it sort of half coughed and then lang. I go, that's not good. I know it. Off with the key, cruise into home, Conrod. Just like that.
Exhibit A.
2 pieces. Very rusty, and I was wondering whether it might have been a little critter in there actually. So that's been on the shelf, one of the...
I told you he doesn't throw anything out.
All right, that's pretty cool.
That is cool.
The flat top.
Yep.
So the only thing we could work out was that we hydraulic the cylinder. And
when you flooded it with the...
When I flooded with the needle and seat. And unbeknownst to us, it's just give the Conrod a little tweak. And then once it got a rev, it's decided to bend and then let go. And fortunately, it was going that slow when it let go, as it didn't do any other...
It was at idle, not at 6
No damage to the bore, no nothing. We put a new piston and Conrod in it, and away she went, and it's still going today. So just one of those lessons you learn.
Did you get rid of the rattle, Howard?
Got rid of the rattle. Went very well after that.
Very good.
So the next stage to this now is the trim's all together.
Yep.
And we're getting close, and we're way over time, Dale, but I'm just going to keep going. Everyone
Doesn't
tells
matter.
me they're just going to keep watching it. So from the States, the door trims and all, aluminium, the Zeus fasteners and all that, that's all happening.
How's that race look, was it?
That race look in the States was all to go. So I'm sort of dabbling in that. So I've got a bond cage in it.
Yep.
And I've bought that unpolished and then polished it myself. And I'm going to dig that photo out, Louise, and we'll put that in there. But there's a really cool one of me, all black, after I finish polishing it. And the dash has been, blanked out on the outside.
Yep.
And then, a bit of road sign with the same switches I used in the panel van. So they're now all the switches for the fans and lights and all the rest of it, and some video gauges.
The funky shifter.
And the Bob Sherry shifter.
Yep.
And that shifter Bob had made for his drag cars, and it's effectively the main lever has got an arm that goes through the floor there, you can see, and it's like was a solid piece of aluminium with a heam joint either end, direct onto the gearbox. Yep. So there was nothing, it was like you were going clunk, 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 and then all the levers, when you put the into first, the second lever gave you second, the third gave you third, and then the fourth one was the lockout for neutral and reverse. Okay. So you couldn't get a false neutral so when you're actually staging it.
Very clever. It just looked intimidating.
Yeah, and it was really, the concept was simple, but it worked really well. So the association with my brother, Bob, doing his engines, and we were talking, and he had one, and I bought one, and that's how it ended up in there. So there was all these things that came along, and I'd always been a fan of the moon tank. Mm-hmm. So, I wanted one of those, not very functional, didn't hold much fuel, looked pretty cool.
Looked good.
And didn't last long, as it turned out anyhow, because we just made changes. And then the old Holly Blue, the brrrr in the boot.
The screaming boot noise.
Whatever you do, don't solid mount it onto a piece of aluminium sheet, because it makes the noise 3 times as loud. And then like a filter that basically come off of earth.
It's a marine application.
I think more of a earth moving application probably. Yep. So that was the way the boot was set up initially, and then this photo here is that finished engine bay at that stage. So I can really only tell a difference because we've got the chrome top on it still, and the rest of it's pretty much the way that first era was. So these now is the 86 Nationals, and there's a couple of photos there of cleaning it up. So we'd made top 60, which was I think top 70 back then, and nothing else. So we'd basically done okay, but not at the pointy end. So we did a few more shows, and then it's back over my brother's getting the engine out, and there's something wrong there because the engine's still in and the engine's out. But anyhow, we had some problems with the filler in the engine bay. So I ground all the problems out and bogged them up and shot a bit of colour on it. And then while I was at it, I thought, well, I'll box them bloody sway bar brackets in because they always look ugly. So I boxed them in while I was at it.
You're never satisfied, were you?
Just tweaking, always tweaking, doing a little bit more, a little bit more. And that appears as though I'm painting that at home in acrylic with newspaper. And if anyone, all those people watching this that do a little bit at home, don't use newspaper. Because if you've got a light colour, you'll be able to read the print under the clear. Because I did that on Rock 3. So just another lesson. So back over for the engine back in. So obviously the first photo was the engine getting ready to go back in. So that would have been pushed back to my joint then and get organised. So I talked earlier about the chrome. This is
what the judges said you needed, Howard.
The judges said you need chrome. So what's Howard do? Just pull it all apart. So that all happened around the time we'll do the bay, get that sorted out, get all of those bits chrome. But being me, I got a bit carried away, so I chromed the rotors.
Yes.
That didn't work so good. First time I was at a show and I went for I forgot, and I've gone screaming down the road, hit the brakes and all the faces and all chromed. Didn't stop real good. Trophy hunter, mate.
Yeah, that's it.
Trophy hunter. So you can see in the mirrors there. Chrome everything. And I mean, like it did go bling and it looked cool, but
Yep.
it really wasn't my style, I guess. And then this is Victorian State Title, I reckon. Yep, it's Victorian State Title. So that's pretty much the pinnacle of where it was at.
Yep.
In that first rock solid stage.
Mm-hmm.
And then lo and behold,
You weren't satisfied, were
I
you?
wasn't happy.
No.
So we blew it apart, and I don't remember the timelines on this except for the fact that, as per usual, it wasn't long. So the idea was fix all the things you're not happy with, make some changes, get rid of those leaf springs, set the ladder bars up properly, and the process then was just to start pulling bits off. And I'd made up my mind I was going to weld up all of those horrible joins in the engine bay that are really hard to work with. And as you can see, the engine mounts were trimmed down and welded solid. Now, I'd ask people when they see this to remember it's 40 years ago, and I would not recommend most of this nowadays.
No.
I don't have a problem with welding the towers and stuff up, but the way the mounts were done, a lot of things done on this, I don't believe is good engineering sense. In what I know now, but at the time we were trying to make things look cool and nice and clean and lean. And
again, you didn't have anything you could base it on, like the access to engineering or the access to information. And that as well.
There was no awareness, but I mean, I'm just trying to make things, clean things up and make it look cool.
Yep.
And you can see there I've welded the firewall to the side skirt, and then I've boxed in the rail, so normally you can see down through there and you can't clean in there and all. Make a bit of plate, weld it in.
Yep.
And that cross member has all been trimmed down and then welded up. And it looks like I might have put a full bit of plate on the underside, which is good because otherwise it would have no strength.
It had some.
But I mean, I know at times where Ford, would have a panel that would go out and be spot welded and cut that off and then weld it. Well, eventually it will crack and run along there.
Yes.
And I know those things now, but I didn't know it then. And we were just chopping things up and changing it. So you can see there the sway bar mounts boxed from the top and the nuts welded in. And then where the caster bar goes in, it's normally got 3 or 4 panels that make that where that rubber goes. They've all been trimmed off, and then that was all fully welded, all die-ground and then bogged up. And it looked cool. Massive amount of time, but when it's your own time, it doesn't matter. And when you look at it, if you're a Ford guy looking at it, wow, that's so clean. Just ridiculous amount of hours. So all those bolt-in skirts were all welded in, so made up out of a bit of 1.6, welded in to cover things, and then everything boxed all the way along. So the family's growing. So Louise now that does the editing is a little one, and young Lee there as well, and the car progressing. So this photo here now, people always ask me, how did you get rid of the lip? And at the time I recall, I just chopped a couple of inches off and welded it up. And then
quite
chopped
simple,
a couple
really.
of inches off, welded it up. The crazy part is, and I'm going to just run through some photos here for those people that don't know the structure of these cars, is that this is, I think, Darren Blackman's car when we did his. The firewall has a return lip on it, and then the next panel that sits on top of that, so the bottom of the plenum, so all the water that runs down through your wipers runs out through the end, is then from the factory, the 3 are spot welded together. You can see there where we've spot welded the 2 lowers together. So that's 2 lips, and then when the top goes on, that creates those 3 where the clamps are, that gets welded and is always difficult to do something with. And I thought I would just try and explain what I think. If someone came to me now and said, how would you get rid of those?
Because you can see where the wiper motor mounts, and on the previous, the photo of your vehicle that
it's gone.
It's gone. There's nothing there.
So I give it a bit of thought, and I was thinking that you could probably straighten the lip up on the firewall. And then bend the next one up to that so you could weld that, and that would create your dish for your water. And then where the plenum comes down from the top where the clamps are there now, you could cut the lip off and weld it to that bit that's up. And I think that would be structurally sound. it's not going to leak water. It's not going to be a long-term rust problem, and you would end up with that. And that's what everyone's seen that car went, oh wow, how'd you do that?
Yep.
I've probably still got the scars from the MIG welder.
Yes.
When you're trying to weld the 3 bits that have got that horrible bloody sealant and all in between it. But I basically cut it off.
Yep.
And then just sat there going zip, 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 grind for days probably to get rid of it.
It looks impressive.
I've seen the car 30 years later and it's still okay.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't recommend that's the way to do it.
Yep.
And you can see there now in that photo that when you look at where the steering box goes on there, there's a bit of round tube there. That would have been where the cables all came in for the starter motor. So this was the start of that trying to hide everything. So the engine sat there and it didn't, besides the plug leads, it didn't appear to have everything that would make it work.
Yeah, you think, how's it work?
Yeah.
How's it run?
So that was a bit of a new thing that was going on. And then what you're looking at there now is the next stage of the rear of the car. And I was a little bit confused in my mind what was going on because the parcel shelf's got a massive hole in it.
The parcel shelf almost doesn't exist.
And then I recall that we did end up putting a fuel tank in behind there where that little moon tank was.
Yep.
We give that the flick and put a decent tank in it. And I don't have any recollection of why I cut the big hole, but there was a tank went in there, and you'll see in a photo in a minute where it went to. And you can see the brackets and all for those pumps and everything are all in there. And we're now setting up for a set of coilovers to get rid of the leaf springs. So there's me offside of Luigi Piori. And I've always built my cars with a string line up the middle, especially when later on we started doing chassis and stuff. That building background, I guess, where we'd run a string line up the middle and square everything off of that. And the cars always ran true, so I guess something must have worked. So if you've got a centre line and you're squared to the
especially when you're cutting floors out, Howard.
Yeah. So we're cutting a bit out.
Yep.
And in hindsight, that's a funny thing, hindsight, I probably should have mini-tubbed it at the same time, but I chose not to. And at this point in time, this car's got full rego on it. And we're starting to now get to that point where you've broken the back of that a bit. So to mount the coilovers, I've put a piece of solid through that back rail, plug welded on the back and with a thread on the other side. And that big centre section now that makes up the floor, I reckon that was a bit of 2mm, but it might have been 1.6. And I had a local shop there that I used to use that would roll some steel and stuff up for me. So I'd make a cardboard template, bit of the old cardboard assisted design back then, take it there and I'd make up the shape that I wanted and he'd roll it for me and I'd take it home and knock it around a bit, take it back, tweak it.
Still do that today, don't you?
Still do that. Don't have any of that big machinery. So that was the back. That's me on the grinder. Did a bit of that. And then the next stage here is where we're chopping out all of that stuff that holds the front spring mount off the standard springs, because that's all really ugly area on these cars. So I've just zoomed in a bit there where you can see I've cut that out with the oxy, and the lip where the inner wheel tub to the floor, I've cut that off and seamed it up and put some plates and stuff in there. But once again, I wouldn't recommend that. When I did my Mustang, I actually cut it about every 20mm and knocked it over and welded it. So you keep the integrity of the design. So you can see there, this was all 2mm by the look of the way that's sitting. And then that's all welded in. So I wasn't racing, so I wasn't worried about the weight.
No.
And in most cases, the original floor was still there. And then you can see now with
it's such a clean look now, isn't it?
A bit of bulk. And I'm surprised how similar that is to Boss XC.
Yes.
Actually. So that whole flow through that area that we then continued into the back where we put another piece of plate in the bottom and then welded all those brackets and all.
So you could say you got carried away, Howard. But
yeah, a little bit. Yeah. A lot of late nights. And remembering that this was all done outside of work. So I was going to work 5 days a week, and then this was every night, every weekend. And I don't recall the length of this build, but it was probably 6 months, something like that. So the back's looking really cool. So then it's like, maybe we could do a bit more of that. And it blows me away now that the dash and all's still in the car. And like nowadays, as you know what I'm like, it's like, get all that out of there. You don't want to damage none of that. It's quicker to pull it out than to try and clean it afterwards.
Yes.
So, more steel. So, I've gone right through where the seat mounts were.
This is one heavy car.
Solid.
It's very solid.
Solid.
Rock solid, you might say.
Rock solid. And I've put this one in. Well, I've pretty much put every photo I had in because I didn't have that many. So, you can see all of the trim sitting up at the top there just with some bed sheets over them. While we're in there grinding and carrying on. And now what I've got there now is the rear mount for the gearbox.
Yep.
So once again, it's a really ugly piece from the factory, and I've obviously made a decision that I thought it looked better. I don't know nowadays whether I think it looks better or not, but we did that. And that torque box and all is not normally joined to the floor. No. So I've boxed all that in, and then you can see down further where the floor has got the recesses in it. There's another piece of plate going out to the sill because that's like a real ugly area to try and clean. So obviously I've made the decision that everything's going to get boxed and filled up, and then out with the bog. But the value of using that heavy steel is that you're not doing a lot of filling because it doesn't move too much when you're welding it up.
Yes.
That photo there is the old, oh no, what have I done photo.
Have I bitten off more than I can chew? I notice in the background it looks like there's a carton of Coke cans.
Now, I've probably told you many times, Dale, I think I started drinking Coca-Cola when I was about 13 or 14 when I was at boarding school. And
no wonder the share values are so high.
Under the cans is the old 750ml glass bottles because they're a better tasting Coke than a can of Coke.
Than a can, yes.
And I think I've educated you enough to know that now.
I do know that.
So, yeah, I used to buy a dozen 750mls. And it's funny, they look huge, and when you consider a 600, you don't think a 600 would be very big.
Exactly.
And the 750 ain't that much bigger.
No.
But there's always a Coke, but I've got a bit of a Southwark on my hand there, mate, the old Southie, South Australian beer, and the Dick Johnson T-shirt from the Mustang era.
Can't take the Ford out of the boy, can we?
That's it. So we're whacking the bog back in it now.
Yep.
So you can see the towers and all. I've actually ground all the original bog out because I didn't want that problem to rear its ugly head again. And then re-bogged it, re-primed it.
It's looking pretty tidy.
And now we're going down the 2K track. So previously I'd been sponsored and supported by Berger Paints, and Berger in Australia had brought in Speedsecker, and they wanted me to go over and use the Speedsecker, and I'd never used it obviously, and Gary had never used it, and we decided that we'd give it a go.
Yeah, I'm going to be.
So Gary's probably looking like, what have I done? So we had the support of the rep and the state manager, and it's interesting to see the guard there up in the air there above Gary's head there, that we've just blocked out the whole car utilising the previous paint job and whatever else was under there, and then we've shot a coat of 2K high build primer over it, as you do. Not as I do anymore, but that's what happened then. No. So lots of product, and then all hands on deck. So that's Gary, Louis in the middle with giving us the bird, and then the rep from Berger, which I don't recall his name. And the next one we've roped in that was the state manager of Berger.
Give him a coat and put him to work.
Cedric Tucker, I reckon his name was. So all hands on deck.
Yep.
And that shed I built with a drain in the floor so that you could rub down acrylic inside, which is a pretty cool idea. So now we're getting a bit of colour, and you can see that flow of that floor, and a bit of this is how you do it type of deal from the rep. So very new technology to all of us, and obviously very little awareness of the dangers of spraying 2-pack. We've got a pretty good headgear on. Not a lot of ventilation, but...
No, need to work on the ventilation, but...
So you can see the door jams there are still red.
Yep, and the parts are still sitting up on the shelf, covered up, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully well covered. All the Recaros and all.
Yep.
And then we now got some colour. So I'm thinking that's the right. It's all colour sanded, but I'm thinking that's where we're up to. And then all of those ancillaries they've got to get painted as well.
Tail lights and bumper bars and. Now is that off the gun, Howard? That looks rather.
It's pretty shiny, eh?
Pretty shiny.
I don't recall polishing it all. We probably had to denib a bit, but I'm pretty sure it was off the gun, and that was the part of the process of 2K is that you didn't have to polish it. That was the theory.
Yep. And
a good theory that was. So that's going together and looking pretty spectacular, and the photos really don't do it justice.
Yep.
So we've got the paint happening, and in the meantime, I've seen another story somewhere about running the handbrake.
Probably in America, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And they actually make kits and all now for a 9-inch. But unbeknownst to me, I wasn't aware that legality-wise, you can't have a hydraulic handbrake because it can bleed down. So therefore, it's not a safety brake.
Okay.
So if you pull a handbrake on, it's got to be mechanical.
Yep.
So this was actually off a front brake off a motorbike, off a Kawasaki, and I mounted the master cylinder in a boot with a cable.
Okay.
And when you pulled the lever, you pulled the cable that pulled the lever off the motorbike handlebar that made it worked.
There you go, it worked.
But it potentially can bleed down, so it's not a good idea.
Not quite legal.
We don't want to park it on a hill. No. But it looked cool, and it got so much attention.
Yeah. And
Kim Hooper welded a bit of mild steel onto the cast for me. He was a very clever welder. Stick welded it, and then I got that machined up, and we bolted all that up, and that all looked pretty cool. And then we needed so the brackets were already there for the ladder bar.
Yep.
So we just extended those out with a bit of solid to pick up the coilovers. You can see there, welded on there, fresh coat of 2K, and then all the brakes, and then this is where they were painted. Yeah,
the vineyard.
Make sure the neighbour's not home.
Yep.
And then that's that finished look. So the chrome spacks.
Yep.
And everything polished and looking $1 million.
That's pretty spiff.
And then I look at that and I just think, 40 years ago, guys. 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So, shockies in single shear and, Panhard bars on massive angles and all sorts of crazy stuff
all the wrong things, but at the time.
But the king of bling was looking pretty blingy and looking pretty cool.
Chasing trophies, Howard.
Chasing trophies. So that's it there from underneath. Chrome tail shaft, is it?
Yep.
Wowzers.
You've lashed out,
Things we did.
Yep.
So this is the motor as it come out of the number one. And I just wanted to quickly point a couple of things out. The water pump on there people asked me about. So that was a standard Repco replacement water pump. And then I ground all the ribs off it to make it look
probably
cool.
Had 30 hours work just on a water pump, but had a bit of work.
But also had no strength left in it. So once again, not the desired thing. The fan was absolutely useless from a cooling point of view, but sort of looked cool. And then the brackets for the wire leads, for the plug leads, people used to ask me about as well. So they were a bit of 50mm angle iron.
Aluminium angle, wasn't it?
Aluminium angle. Yep. Cut off and then shaped and all the holes drilled in them. And like the front one had 4 holes and then it worked its way down, then 3, then 2. And then they had little grommets in them.
So it wouldn't rub.
Pain in the arse to put it all through, and then where it came up around the front of the head, there was one up there with the 4, all going through the 1, and then I got a silicon that was for electrical, so non-conductive silicon, and glued them together and put plastic tyres on it, and then once it all set, took the tyres off, and they always sat and looked the same, and people would look at it and go,
how did you do that?
How'd you do that?
Can't tell you.
Yeah, not telling you. And people used to try and, will you make me a set of lead? Because you couldn't really buy anything.
No.
And Chevy, bloody Chev stuff, I always had like one that bolted onto the rocker cover and all the leads sat on it. And this was my homemade version of that.
Well, especially with the Dizzy sitting in the front of the engine, it sort of stands out,
really
doesn't it?
In your face. So that was done. And then with the new look, we went to a different colour. So we've gone the blue. There's Heather. checking out what's going on.
She's just showing up a perm. That's what it is.
And you see in the background there, the car's got the plate on it and the lights in it.
Yep.
It's obviously getting close.
Yep.
And so it's all together. And there it is, back in the hole. So now we've gone painted scoop, got the red in the top of the rocker covers. Yep. I'm a bit surprised I still left the red in the alternator. You know, to me, I look at it now and think maybe it should have been blue. But one of the things I hadn't pointed anywhere away along, that top radiator hose, where it goes into the block, that was a massive Duffield fitting.
Okay.
For from underground, from like a 2-inch water pipe.
Yep.
For pumping bloody water out somewhere. Mm-hmm. Then we welded tabs on it.
Okay.
So it would bolt to the block, and then machine the back of it out to tape the thermostat.
So you're always an innovator.
Always thinking, mate. So that was that, and then I've now made the little brackets on the grill.
Yep.
So they were, normally a pressed little thing, chromed up bits and pieces. So just trying to really clean it up and make everything sort of sit and look pretty cool. And then some of that leftover chrome, so we got all that chrome I sent away and done, so pans and added to the blue. And then the interior, I've got rid of those aluminium panels now.
Yep.
And had my old mate Tates do up some door trims for me, Neville Taylor.
Yep.
And we got some Recaro fabric and sewed that up and put a bit of a line in it, and the rest of that was pretty much the way it was. And then the boot, more carpet, got rid of the aluminium, painted up bits and pieces with that nice Holden colour, that cyan metallic.
Yes. And
boxed in where the fuel tank was. So that used to have a little tool drawer and all sorts of things for points. And now we're at that stage where we're now polishing the 2K. Because when we went to paint the outside of the car, one of the issues that we had no thought about was painting over that original paintwork. All the polishes and all that had gone into it.
Because you just basically blocked the original paint
put
high fill primer,
and then painted the car.
And then painted the car.
And what happened was it fish-eyed. And it fish-eyed like you would not believe. So we rubbed it down.
Was that the precursor to hammer tone, was it?
It was a shocker. So we've squirted it again, I just did one panel.
Yeah.
So we ring the rep up, and we're in panic mode. We never use 2K, right?
No.
Oh, yeah, get some silicone drops. Right? So I don't know if you know about this stuff, but say the silicone drops, you drop them in and it lowers the viscosity of the paint.
Yeah.
So it should lay down better, like oil.
Yes.
You know oil?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
lays down.
Yep.
So the idea is it then flows into where it's making the little fish oil gadget, right?
Yep.
So you drop down. So we try that, it's not really working. So there's a maximum how much you can put in. So we've gone well over the maximum to get it to work. And we're testing on a flat surface. So then we paint the car. It ran off the car.
It's good on a flat surface.
Yeah, so all the sides, all the way along, is hanging off the car. And we're, I don't know, a week out. And we're just at wit's end. So I said to Gary, I'm just going to block it all out. And I don't remember what I used now, but it was definitely 800, maybe even 600. Blocked all the tops off.
Yep.
You know what I'm like with that stuff. I'll go, all right. So I blocked it all down and then worked our way back through the grits. And then him and I double teamed on the buff and spent days and days and days. The result, though, was unbelievable. So it's the first time I'd really fully flattened a paint job. And I mean, and I've cut it really hard and then worked our way back up.
Like it had a lot of paint on it.
And it came out it came out sensational.
Yeah.
So that was at Wagga 88. So the car was in pieces for the first Nationals because I'm out doing this rebuild.
Yep.
And getting ready for the Nationals at Wagga.
Yep. And
Chick Henry announces some of that's like late in the year and too late for me. So we didn't take the car to this first Summer Nats because it was in pieces, and we headed off to Wagga. And the car did really well.
It did do very well.
So it won top judged.
Exhibit A.
So we've gone from...
So we've got... I don't know how I'm going to fit this all
Yeah,
in the
there you go.
picture.
It
Yeah,
fits.
beautiful.
So we've gone from being nowhere near the top of the heap, and it was really crazy that year because, you know, what's happening with the car, Hal? Oh, we just won the Nationals.
Yep.
Oh, really? I thought Robbie Beecham won the Nationals. I go, no, he won the Summer Nats. We won the Nationals. They go, well, no, they're the same thing. I'm going, no, one's the Australian Street Machine Federation Nationals.
Yep.
So I got the national title.
Yes.
Summer Nats is an individual event run by Summer Nats. Okay. So
very confusing.
Because Street Machine Magazine is the major sponsor and the heavy promoter, Summer Nats went straight away to being the thing to win.
Yes.
So we'd always chase every second year you went to the Nationals. All of a sudden now it's Summer Nats.
Yep.
You know, and rightfully so. I mean, that's most cars were there. So these were all at the Nationals. So that's us at Summer Nats, on the streets of Summer Nats, cruising around. So we did lots of shows. That's back down in Victoria for the state titles. Renmark, by the look of that one. Summer Nats again. That's down near the Caratel.
Yep.
And then that's it. So that would have been Summer Nats. I've got that here somewhere.
Yep, you got one there.
So what are we up to? Summer Nats 89.
Entrance,
Summer Nats 2.
entrance
so
choice.
That's one of the trophies. So that's entrance choice. So they were a really cool trophy.
Howard Astill, with his red GT Falcon from Broken Hill, has taken home top undercarriage driveline, top engine bay and top engineered street machine.
Had the car featured the first time round
Yes.
at the 86 Nationals, and then Street Machine chose to run pretty much what was the same car because I stupidly redid it the same colour. I should have painted it blue or something because then it would have been like
a whole new build.
New build.
People didn't appreciate how much effort
No one
had
knew
gone
that
into
we
it.
resprayed the whole thing, and
No.
then when those that did know started looking and go, oh wow, look how much they've done. So that was the feature, and when I look back now and look at those photos, it was pretty cool, and it was really a happening thing at the time, and we got a lot out of it. And then, as people will see next time, we did it again.
Yes.
Can't help myself. So that's where we got to with that car.
Yep.
And that now is what I see as number 2. So I've combined
the van.
the van, number 1.
Yep.
The burgundy one in 2 guises is number 2.
Yes.
And next time around, we've got Rock 3. So the blue version.
Yep.
This one.
That one there.
So we'll get through that.
Yep.
And we've gone nearly an hour and a half, and people say if it's interesting they're going to watch it. So I couldn't make it any quicker.
Well, we've done 2 cars.
I was concerned I didn't have enough photos, but obviously there's plenty to talk about.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us again. Hopefully I'm giving you a good insight into how it all came about and some of the things we've done, some of the things I wouldn't do again, and how we went about it back then. And as we progress through these stages, we'll see how that's changed.
We'll see how Howard learns,
Yeah,
how he improves.
How we go and the people we work with and how it goes along. So thanks for joining us.
Yep.
Thanks to Lovells
Yes.
and their support that's enabled us to continue to do this. Thanks for your time again, Dale.
Pleasure, Howard.
It's always good to catch up and reminisce.
Yes.
And thank you all for joining us. Don't forget, if you haven't subscribed, click the like button and
leave a
shoot
comment.
me a message. Yeah, and if you've got some questions or queries that I haven't covered in there, I'm more than happy to try and help out with that. If it's a technical thing, like someone asked me about spray guns and stuff the other day, sometimes it takes me a couple of days to chase that down, and I'll definitely get back to you. So thanks again, and goodbye for now. Thanks, Dale.
Thanks, Howard.
Bye.
See ya.